What happens when one of the most beloved talk show hosts in America invites a member of the British royal family onto his stage, expecting a friendly conversation about charity work and mental health awareness, only to find himself face to face with something he never anticipated? What happens when the cameras are rolling, the audience is watching, and a guest decides to throw every rule of decorum right out the window? It only took 39 seconds. 39 seconds from the moment Jon Stewart asked a simple follow-up question to the moment security was being waved toward the stage. 39 seconds for an interview that was supposed to be about healing and growth to spiral into one of the most uncomfortable confrontations ever broadcast on late-night television. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how everything fell apart so spectacularly, we need to go back to the beginning. We need to understand how this interview came together in the first place, what both sides were expecting, and how a simple conversation transformed into something nobody could have predicted. The booking itself had been in the works for months. Jon Stewart, having returned to television after years away, had built a reputation for conducting thoughtful, probing interviews that balance humor with substance. His show had become a destination for authors, politicians, activists, and yes, even members of foreign royal families. The format was simple. Come on, have a genuine conversation. Maybe get challenged a little bit, but ultimately leave having connected with an audience that valued authenticity above all else. Prince Harry had been making the media rounds promoting his various initiatives. His team had reached out to Stewart's producers, and after some back and forth, a date was set. The understanding was clear. They would discuss Harry's charitable work, his transition to life outside the traditional royal structure, and perhaps touch briefly on his perspectives about media treatment. Standard fare for a late-night appearance. The studio that evening buzzed with anticipation. The audience, carefully selected and thoroughly briefed on applause cues, filled the seats with an energy that suggested they knew they were about to witness something special. A genuine prince, on American soil, sitting down with one of America's sharpest comedic minds. What could possibly go wrong? The show opened as it always did. Jon Stewart walked out to enthusiastic applause, delivered his opening monologue, and then turned to the camera with that familiar twinkle in his eye. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "my next guest tonight has had quite the journey, from Buckingham Palace to Southern California, from prince to podcast host, from tabloid target to, well, still a tabloid target, but now he gets to respond. Please welcome Prince Harry." The audience erupted. Harry walked out from behind the curtain, waving to the crowd with that practiced royal wave that somehow managed to look both natural and completely rehearsed at the same time. He shook Stewart's hand, they exchanged a few words off microphone, and then both men settled into their chairs. "Thank you for being here," Stewart began, his tone warm and welcoming. "I know you have been busy. Books, documentaries, podcasts. You have become quite the media mogul." Harry smiled, though there was something slightly stiff about it. "Thank you for having me, Jon. It is always nice to be somewhere where people actually want to have a real conversation." The audience laughed politely. Stewart nodded, picking up on the subtle jab at other media outlets. "Well, we try," Stewart said. "So let us start with the work you have been doing. The Invictus Games, for instance. Can you tell us a bit about what that means to you?" Harry leaned forward, and for a moment, he seemed genuinely passionate. "The Invictus Games represent everything I believe in. These are men and women who have sacrificed so much for their countries, and they deserve to be seen. They deserve to be celebrated. The Games give them that platform. And you served yourself," Stewart added. 2 tours in Afghanistan, correct?" "That is right," Harry confirmed. 10 years in the army. It was the best time of my life. No one treated me differently there. I was just one of the guys." Stewart nodded thoughtfully. "That must have been quite a contrast to palace life." "Completely different worlds," Harry agreed. "In the military, you earn respect. At the palace, respect is just assumed because of who you were born as. I always found that troubling." This was the moment where things began to shift, though perhaps neither man realized it at the time. Stewart, always the interviewer who listened carefully, picked up on something in that last statement. "That is interesting," Stewart said, his tone still friendly but with an undercurrent of genuine curiosity. "Because some might argue that much of your current platform, your ability to get these interviews, to launch these projects, to command these audiences, that comes from who you were born as, the prince part. Do you think about that contradiction?" The studio seemed to hold its breath. It was a fair question, asked without malice, but it clearly caught Harry off guard. His smile faltered for just a moment. "I think," Harry said slowly, "that I have worked very hard to create my own identity separate from the institution." "Of course," Stewart agreed. "But the question is whether that separate identity would have the same reach without the royal connection. Like, if you were Harry Jones from Manchester, would Netflix be calling?" A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience. Harry shifted in his seat. "I think that is a rather reductive way of looking at it, Jon." "Is it?" Stewart pressed gently. "I am genuinely asking, because I think there is something fascinating there. You have been very critical of the institution, of the media, of the whole system, but you are also very much still benefiting from it. How do you reconcile those two things?" Harry's jaw tightened visibly. "I have given up an enormous amount to be where I am. I have lost my home, my security, my connection to my family. I do not think people understand the sacrifices that have been made." "Help us understand then," Stewart said, leaning in. "Because from the outside, it looks like you left one mansion for another. You traded one set of cameras for a different set that you now control. I am not saying that is wrong, by the way. I am just wondering if you see it that way." The atmosphere in the studio had changed completely. What had started as a friendly chat now felt like something far more charged. Harry's face had flushed slightly, and his responses were becoming shorter, clipped. "I do not think you understand what it is like," Harry said, his voice carrying an edge now, "to grow up in that environment, to have your entire life dictated by protocol and tradition, to watch your mother be hounded to death by the very media you are now suggesting I should be grateful to." The mention of Princess Diana sent a visible ripple through the audience. Stewart paused, clearly aware that they had entered sensitive territory. "I am not suggesting you should be grateful to the media," Stewart said carefully. "And I would never minimize what happened to your mother. That was a tragedy, and the media's role in it was unconscionable." Harry seemed momentarily appeased, but Stewart continued, "But here's what I am trying to understand. You have spoken a lot about wanting privacy. You have talked about the invasive nature of media coverage. And yet, you have also released a memoir that details incredibly private family conversations. You have done documentary series that invite cameras into your home. You have given interview after interview. At what point does the call for privacy become, I do not know, selective?" Harry's expression hardened. "Those are my stories to tell. I have every right to share my own experiences." "Absolutely," Stewart agreed. "But some of those stories involve other people. Your father, your brother, your stepmother. Do they not also have a right to their version of events, or to privacy themselves?" "They have the entire institution to tell their side," Harry shot back. "They have centuries of tradition and an army of press officers. All I have is my voice." "And a Netflix deal," Stewart added quietly. The audience gasped slightly. It was a pointed comment, delivered without malice, but with undeniable precision. Harry stared at Stewart for a long moment, and something seemed to shift behind his eyes. "You know what, Jon? I came here expecting to have a thoughtful conversation. I came here because I respected your work, but this feels like an ambush." Stewart held up his hands. "Harry, I promise you, this is not an ambush. These are questions that a lot of people have. I am giving you the opportunity to address them directly." "Questions that people have?" Harry repeated, his voice rising. "Or questions that the tabloids want asked? Are you working for them now, Jon? Is that what this is?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Stewart's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of something, perhaps disappointment, perhaps frustration, in his eyes. "I have spent my entire career holding powerful people accountable," Stewart said, his voice even but firm. "Politicians, corporations, media moguls. I do not exempt anyone from scrutiny just because of their title or their trauma." Harry leaned forward aggressively. "Do not talk to me about trauma. You have no idea what I have been through." "You are right," Stewart acknowledged. "I do not. But you have told me. You have told everyone. In great detail, multiple times. That is the point I am making. You have made your trauma public, which invites public discussion. You cannot share your story with millions of people and then be offended when those people have questions." Harry's face had gone from flushed to genuinely red. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. "This is exactly what happens," Harry said, his voice trembling with anger. "Every single time. I try to have an honest conversation, and it gets twisted into something else. You are just like the rest of them." The rest of whom? Stewart asked. The media, the establishment, everyone who wants to tear me down because I dared to step out of line, because I chose love over duty, because I refused to play their game. Stewart shook his head slowly. Harry, I am not trying to tear you down. I am trying to have a genuine conversation with you. But a genuine conversation means asking real questions, not just lobbing softballs so you can promote your latest project. And what exactly qualifies you to ask these questions? Harry demanded. What do you know about sacrifice? About duty? About loss? You sit here in your comfortable studio, making jokes, and you think you have the right to judge me? The audience had gone completely silent. This was no longer an interview. This had become something else entirely. Stewart took a deep breath. I'm not judging you, Harry. I'm questioning you. There is a difference. And in a democracy, in a free society, we question people in positions of influence. That is how it works. I am not in a position of influence, Harry protested. I gave that up. You are on television right now talking to millions of people, Stewart pointed out. You have the ear of world leaders, celebrities, media executives. You shape public discourse about mental health, about the monarchy, about privacy. That is influence, whether you want to call it that or not. Harry stood up suddenly, and the movement was so abrupt that the camera operators scrambled to adjust. The audience let out a collective gasp. I did not come here to be lectured by a comedian, Harry said, looking down at Stewart, who remained seated. I came here to talk about the work I am doing, the work that actually matters. But clearly, you are more interested in playing gotcha journalism than having a real conversation. Stewart remained remarkably composed. Harry, please sit down. Let us talk this through. No, Harry said firmly. I have been talked at enough. I have been questioned enough. I have been doubted and dismissed and disrespected enough. I will not sit here and let you add to that list. I am not disrespecting you, Stewart said, a note of exasperation finally creeping into his voice. I am treating you like any other guest, like an adult who can handle being asked difficult questions. Harry laughed bitterly. Like any other guest? John, I am a prince. I was born into 1,000 years of history. I have lived through things you could not imagine. And you think you can sit there and question my motives, my choices, my integrity? There it was, the moment that would be replayed countless times in the days to come. The moment when the mask slipped, when the man who had spent years talking about wanting to be treated as normal suddenly invoked his royal status as a shield against criticism. Stewart's eyes widened slightly. You just said, moments ago, that you found it troubling that respect at the palace was assumed because of who you were born as. And now you are telling me I cannot question you because you are a prince? Harry opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. For a fraction of a second, something like recognition flickered across his face, but it was quickly replaced by renewed anger. You are twisting my words. I am playing them back to you, Stewart replied. That is not the same thing. Harry began to pace behind his chair, his security detail watching nervously from the wings. The audience was transfixed, unsure whether to be horrified or fascinated by what they were witnessing. You know what your problem is, John? Harry said, pointing at the host. You think you are above everyone. You sit on your throne of moral superiority, passing judgment on the rest of us. But you do not know anything. You do not know what it is like to be me. You are absolutely right. Stewart agreed. I do not know what it is like to be you, but that is not a requirement for journalism. Reporters do not have to be presidents to interview presidents. Doctors do not have to have cancer to treat cancer patients. The idea that only people with identical experiences can engage with each other is nonsensical. Harry stopped pacing and turned to face Stewart directly. This is exactly the kind of arrogance that destroyed my mother. This belief that the media has the right to pry into every corner of our lives. That we owe you something just because you have a camera and a microphone. Stewart's expression softened for a moment. Harry, I am genuinely sorry for what happened to your mother. That was a tragedy that should never have occurred. But you are conflating two very different things. Paparazzi chasing someone through a tunnel is not the same as a journalist asking questions in a controlled interview setting that you agreed to participate in. It is all part of the same machine, Harry insisted. The same machine that chewed her up and spat her out. The same machine that is now trying to do the same to me. And I will not let it. I will not let you do this to me. Do what? Stewart asked, genuinely confused. Ask you questions? Have a conversation? Harry, this is literally what interviews are. "This is not a conversation," Harry shot back. "This is an interrogation. You had this plan from the beginning. You brought me here to humiliate me." "I brought you here because your team reached out to my producers," Stewart corrected. "You asked to be on this show. I did not hunt you down." This seemed to catch Harry off guard. He paused, his anger momentarily giving way to uncertainty. "That is not," he started, then stopped. "That is not how it was presented to me." "Then perhaps you should have a conversation with your team about communication," Stewart suggested. "But that is not my concern. My concern is this interview, which you are currently in the middle of, standing up and pacing around like you are looking for the exit." Harry looked toward the wings of the stage, where his handlers were watching with barely concealed panic. One of them, a woman with a clipboard, was making urgent gestures that seemed to be suggesting he sit back down. "I do not have to stay here," Harry said, though there was less conviction in his voice now. "I can leave whenever I want." "You absolutely can," Stewart agreed. "No one is holding you prisoner, but if you leave now, this becomes the story. Not your charity work, not your mental health advocacy. This moment, right here, becomes what everyone talks about tomorrow." It was a masterful move on Stewart's part. By pointing out the consequences, he was giving Harry a chance to save face, a chance to sit back down, take a breath, and salvage something from the wreckage of this interview. But Harry did not take it. "Good," Harry said, his voice cold. "Let them talk. Let them see how the media really operates. Let them see what happens when someone refuses to play along with your games." He started walking toward the edge of the stage, then stopped and turned back to face Stewart one last time. "You think you are clever, Jon. You think you have exposed something here tonight, but all you have done is prove exactly what I've been saying all along. The media is not interested in the truth. The media is not interested in nuance or context or understanding. The media is interested in spectacle, in conflict, in tearing people down for entertainment." Stewart remained in his chair, watching Harry with an expression that was impossible to read. "Harry, I asked you straightforward questions. Questions that any journalist would ask. Questions that your own audience probably has. The only spectacle here is the one you are creating right now." "My audience?" Harry laughed incredulously. "My audience understands me. They support me. They see through people like you." "Some of them, perhaps," Stewart acknowledged. "But I think you might be surprised how many people just want honest answers to honest questions. Not everyone who questions you is your enemy." Harry shook his head. "You do not understand. You will never understand. People like you are incapable of understanding what I have been through." With that, he walked off the stage. Not running, not storming, but walking with a deliberate pace that suggested he believed he was making a noble exit, a principled stand against an unjust interrogation. The audience sat in stunned silence for a moment, then a low murmur began to build. People turned to each other, whispering, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Stewart sat alone on the stage, the empty chair across from him, a visual testament to how badly this had gone wrong. He rubbed his face with his hands, then looked out at the audience. "Well," he said finally, his voice carrying that familiar dry humor even in this unprecedented moment that went differently than I expected. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. "Look," Stewart continued, "I want to be clear about something. I did not bring Prince Harry on this show to ambush him. I did not have some secret agenda to make him look bad. I ask questions. That is what I do. That is what journalism is supposed to be." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Prince Harry has been through genuinely difficult experiences. I do not doubt that for a second. The loss of his mother, the scrutiny of growing up royal, the challenges of stepping away from that life, those are real things that cause real pain. But having been through difficult experiences does not exempt anyone from being questioned. It does not make someone immune to accountability." The audience was listening intently now, hanging on every word. "I think what we just witnessed," Stewart said slowly, "is what happens when someone has been surrounded by people who only tell them what they want to hear for so long that any disagreement feels like an attack. When every interview is carefully managed and every question is pre-approved, a real question becomes unbearable." He stood up from his chair and walked to the front of the stage. I asked Harry if he saw the contradiction between criticizing the institution that gave him his platform while continuing to benefit from it. I asked him if his calls for privacy could be considered selective, given how much of his private life he has chosen to share publicly. I asked him to consider whether his experiences, while painful, might not give him a monopoly on suffering or an exemption from scrutiny. Stewart spread his hands. These are not gotcha questions. These are not tabloid questions. These are questions that thoughtful people have been asking for years. The fact that asking them led to what you just witnessed tells us something important about how insulated from normal discourse certain people have become. He looked directly into the camera. I wish Prince Harry well. I genuinely do. I hope he finds the peace he is looking for. I hope his charitable work continues to help people. But I will not apologize for doing my job. And I hope that someday he will be able to engage with questions like these without feeling attacked. Because until he can, I do not think he will ever find what he is looking for. The audience began to applaud. It started slowly, tentatively, as if they were not sure whether applause was appropriate given what had just happened. But it grew in intensity until the studio was filled with the sound of approval. Stewart accepted the applause with a nod, then glanced at his watch. "We have to go to batting. Commercial," he said. "When we come back, we will, I do not know, probably just stare at each other in disbelief for a while." The audience laughed, and for a moment, some of the tension in the room dissipated. But as the lights dimmed and the cameras cut to commercial, everyone in that studio knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Something that would be discussed and debated and analyzed for a very long time. Backstage, Harry was surrounded by his team. The woman with the clipboard was speaking rapidly into her phone. His security detail formed a protective circle around him. Someone handed him a bottle of water, which he accepted but did not drink. "That was a disaster," the woman with the clipboard said, having ended her call. "The press is already running with it." Harry stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. "I said what needed to be said." "You accused Jon Stewart of working for the tabloids," another aide pointed out. Jon Stewart, the man who has been skewering the tabloids for decades. "He was attacking me. He was asking questions," the aide said carefully. "Questions we should have prepared for. Questions we knew might come up." Harry finally turned to look at the aide. "So this is my fault? Is that what you are saying?" The aide backpedaled immediately. "No, of course not. I am just saying we need to get ahead of this. We need to control the narrative." "The narrative," Harry repeated bitterly. "It is always about the narrative." He looked around at the people surrounding him. The handlers, the advisors, the security guards, all of them paid to be there. All of them depended on him for their livelihoods. And he wondered, perhaps for the first time, whether any of them would ever tell him the truth. Out in the studio, Jon Stewart was having a quiet conversation with his producer. "That was intense," the producer said. "Are you okay?" Stewart nodded slowly. "I feel bad, honestly. I do not think I did anything wrong, but I still feel bad. That guy is clearly struggling with something." "You gave him every opportunity to reset," the producer pointed out. "He chose not to take it." "I know, but that almost makes it sadder, does it not? When someone is so deep in their own narrative that they cannot see any other perspective, that is a lonely place to be." The producer shrugged. "Maybe, but that is not your responsibility to fix." "No," Stewart agreed. "It is not." He looked out at the empty stage, the vacant guest chair still sitting there like a monument to what had gone wrong. "Let us just get through the rest of the show," he said. "We will deal with the fallout tomorrow." And so they did. The show continued, though everyone knew the remaining segments were merely epilogue. The story had already been written. The moment had already been captured, and in homes across America and around the world, people were watching, rewinding, and watching again. A prince had come to speak his truth. A host had done his job. And somewhere in the collision between those two things, something had broken that could not easily be put back together. 39 seconds. That is all it took. 39 seconds from a simple question to a complete breakdown. And in those 39 seconds, the world got to see something rare. What happens when privilege meets accountability? When victimhood meets journalism? When the story someone tells themselves runs headlong into the reality everyone else can see? It was uncomfortable. It was compelling. It was, in its own strange way, revelatory. And it was exactly the kind of television that people would be talking about for a very, very long time. Because in the end, what we witnessed was not just a celebrity meltdown. It was not just a bad interview or an unexpected walkout. It was a window into something much larger and much more significant. We saw a man who had spent years carefully constructing a public image as someone who wanted normalcy, who wanted to be treated like everyone else, who wanted to escape the gilded cage of royalty. And we watched that image crumble the moment someone actually treated him like everyone else. Jon Stewart did nothing more than ask the questions that millions of people had been wondering. He did not ambush, attack, or humiliate. He simply held up a mirror. And Harry did not like what he saw reflected back at him. That is what made this moment so extraordinary. Not the drama, not the walkout, but the revelation. The accidental honesty that emerged when the carefully rehearsed talking points ran out and raw emotion took over. 39 seconds changed everything.